Welcome back to the show, everyone. With me today, a special guest. We're in person. Brady Howe, who is the VP of Health and Performance for the Phoenix Suns. Appreciate you being with me today, man. How's it going?
Of course, it's going well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure. And, I've had the fortune of spending the last couple of days with you. Got to go to the game yesterday. And we had some really good conversations at dinner yesterday. So I want to bring some of those conversations to light. I think the one thing that I keep getting fixated on is when we're looking at these high elite athletes, we're looking at high performance, is how do we actually begin to unlock the mindset piece with some of these guys? Because they're so naturally gifted. A lot of these things come natural to these guys. They pick up a basketball and it's natural to them. So we're talking about taking the next step and we're talking about diving into the mindset. How do you get these guys to buy in a little bit to that?
Yeah, what a great question, because if you look at the teams that I work with, roughly 15 to 18 players, I could give you 15 to 18 different answers, right? This is why when it comes to the mindset, the mental piece, psychology, all these various things, it's still in that realm of subjective that people often overlook. They do undervalue subconsciously, even though when you throw it on them, which is what I raised to you yesterday, being a former athlete, how much of the game is mental, how much of the game is physical. If you had to pick out of those two, out of 100, most of the people will instantly, they acknowledge how important the mental aspect is. They'll say something like 80-20, 90-10, some will say 100. That's mental, that drives the physical. But then I love it because they know this question's coming and you flip it on them. All right, well, now you say this is 90-10. How much are you actually training the mental aspect of your game and into your routines and everyday life? And it's a lot. It's probably flipped. If they're lucky, it's 10%, right? And so it's a great question, and that's definitely something that I'm in a phase of my life where I've been exploring that a lot more, not only for myself to unlock peace of mind, fulfillment, creative expression, all these things. That's so funny because as you do get older, you realize these things are so profound and powerful that you often overlooked when you're just young. I'll say careless, but you're young, confident, and you feel like you have so much time ahead of you that those things aren't as important. So it's a great question that you can't really just answer simple, and you have to look at and meet that certain individual where they're at, and you have to just start with some of those basic foundational questions and see where it leads to, because then it leads down to so many different paths, which I'm sure we'll get into further, which for me, it all comes down to choices. It comes down to choices. It comes down to decision-making and, intent, purpose, all these things that all leads to the biggest thing that I am exploring, which is just an overarching theme, is identity. And so I know that probably doesn't quite answer your question, but like I said, I think that we know how much the mindset is an important piece. We do know that all these athletes are doing it to some extent, right? Like, because it's such a subconscious driver of everything that we do. They just don't know how to organize it or to spit it out in a way that makes sense, that says, this is what I do. This is the self-talk I use. This is the everyday I do to help me settle my nerves, to get me primed, prepped, and ready to play in this big game. They don't know those things. They just do it. And that's the cool thing, is you said just pick up a basketball. How many of us have seen, I see it with my daughter, pick up a basketball or pick up something. They just want to do it, and it's fun and it's creative, but you see how inefficient and, just call it what it is, terrible we all are when we start to first do it. Over time, next thing you know, you realize they've been doing it since they were 5. Now these guys are 20 years old, and you can see what they do, and everybody's just in awe of what they can do. But that's the aggregate of marginal gains. This is what they've been doing consistently. And that's where now I'm at this point from a mindset. If we have been and could get to a place where mental skills coaches or just general coaches have those skills to drive the mental element, that can coincide and drive them. Because when it comes to these bigger, high-performing teams or leagues and sports, all coaches do want a high IQ player. And it's not to say other players are inferior, they're idiots, they're dumb. No, it's just a matter of knowing how to put these things in place.
So one thing, I could take this a number of different ways, but we talked about it a little bit yesterday, but meeting someone where they're at and developing that relationship and that trust which I think is the pivotal point for anything if you want to drive someone's actions or behaviors. So for you, how do you meet someone where they're at, and what does that really mean to you? Like, how do you define meeting someone where they're at?
Yeah, again, another great question, because in this realm, what we do is a supportive staff, and what I've done in the past as an athletic trainer, a strength coach, now a little bit more of the mental skills coach piece. It all starts with relationship building. That's what this all is. And in sports too, whether another buzzword is the buy-in,
Yep.
right? The art of buy-in, that's more of the art, the soft skills, some of these things, rather than the technical, tactical piece that these guys learn with the ball in their hand. But it all starts with trust. Those relationships are built off of trust. The things that we do, whether you're a strength coach, a PT, a dietitian, that buy-in, that belief needs to be basically honored. It needs to be brought out of them, because if not, then that relationship is that much further away to meeting them where they're at, to getting to know the true authentic player person. Because I've seen it, I've tried it when I was young. Man, I was a ruthless strength coach early on coming out of college football, where I just thought, man, do as I say, not as I do. I'm just going to blow this whistle, bark at these guys. This is very militant, you know what I mean? There are environments where that thrives. We know that. You know that more than anybody coming from football. But at the same time, you have to build these relationships of getting to know where they're at, meaning it just takes time.
Yep.
And you have to establish that trust. But I will say that no matter what, you have to have a vulnerable piece, which is tough in today's world, because to get their trust and to get to know who they are, you have to be trust willing. So to be trustworthy, you have to be trust willing. So you have to be willing to put yourself out there to show some of the vulnerable things that a lot of us cast shadows on, right? And you're not willing to show that side of you. But it kind of starts with those things, because once you can establish those big rocks and those pillars are set in place, now they hold the weight of what you can continue to build on. So when it comes to these players, whether it is what I've learned in psychology and some of these things, it all comes down to, in my mind, a person or player, but person-centered or person-centric approach. So you see, if you were to have a picture where there's a player, like a bio picture of the player, and then all the cogs in the wheel that go from everything, family, personal life, entourages, agency, coaches, health and performance, you name it, teammates, media, this all builds this big web. And it all stems around them being at the center of it. They are the end user. If you take away all of it, guess what? No matter what, that player and his teammates and a ball is all you need to roll out, and they can still play. But that changes a lot of things, right? When you add all these contextual things, it changes everything. So you say that knowing that you have to have an empathetic side to you to know what's this person about, what drives them, what motivates them, what limits them. And you have to just start figuring out those things. But that is an endless journey that some people want to have these conversations and figure out what's a cheat code or a corner of the cut, what can you get to this result faster. But those are all constructs in my mind, where instead of just saying this person is going to be an evolving person, an evolving story, an evolving thing from the moment they're born to the moment they cease to exist anymore. So it's always growth. And so more than anything, it's just trying to figure out where they're at in life, which for me, that could be a 35 to 38-year-old veteran, or that could be an 18-year-old rookie. I mean, I've had that. I've had the 18-year-old veteran who's right there. He's 38 years old. And then I've got a guy who could be his high school son on the same team. How you approach those two guys is completely different. You just have to know, and this is another interesting piece, is just knowing where the future athlete is coming from. Yeah. As I get older, you or anybody, some of these coaches, let's use Coach Pop as an example. You got a rookie coming in who's 18 years old. That man is 70. That's a wide gap, right? How do you reach those players and develop a relationship? But he's renowned for being able to have those strong ties and relationships. So that's the skill set that I think everybody needs to harness.
To highlight kind of what you're saying is an experience that I have, and I frequently talk about this anytime I'm on a podcast or conversing with someone about relationships, building trust, buy-in, is in my bio on my social media, I always say I was in the NFL for 3 days. It was technically 4, but I think the 3 sounds funnier. But with the Bills in that short period of time, and what I really want to emphasize about the relationship piece. So when I walked in that door, probably no one knew I was there to play football, right? Smaller guy, like just looked like kind of like an average Joe. By the time I left, 4 days, I got cut. Every single coach for the Buffalo Bills knew who I was. They knew my story. They knew where I came from, right? They knew I was engaged in all these different factors. They actually showed genuine care about my life in 4 days. And again, I'm the lowest man like on the totem pole. And when I got cut, like Sean McDermott pulled me to the side and was willing to take that time, empathize with me, talk to me about his own personal experience and how he was in a similar position to me when he came out of William and Mary. Encouraged me to like keep playing, like not quit, things of that nature. But the point of it is it stood out to me so much that he was willing to take the time out of his day and every other coach on that staff to talk with who was likely the lowest man on the totem pole in that building, get to know me, get to know who I was, and get to know what I was about. And so that was coming off of a 6-10 season too. It's not like they were this perennial powerhouse at the time. But so for me, like when I see that and then see the immense success, see the growth of Josh Allen and other players on that team, to me, I always wonder like how much of that is the intangibles, because obviously that's my belief, is obviously most guys in professional sports, not all, but most have a really good feel of X's and O's. But the organizations and the teams that are able to repeat success, and it's a little bit different in basketball and football and baseball and all the sports, but it's like, how do you foster that culture of buy-in from the players? You continue to build that relationship, right? So it's like, how do you measure intangibles? And it's a loaded question, but when you go through your own practice, it's like, how do you measure the intangibles of players versus just pure skill and talent? And how do you morph and get everyone to build off of one another?
Yeah, it's a question that I think everybody's been
Trying to answer.
trying to uncover, unveil, and build this blueprint of how it works. You know what I mean? And I don't think that anybody could ever answer that genuinely. Like, as Steve Kerr and all the success he's had as a player and now coach, you could just think that he's figured it out. Some could just say that he's just a genuine human being that's learned what it takes to treat people the right way, to evaluate the intangibles and to foster them, develop them. But in every sport, we're all trying to figure that out. You know what I mean? I kind of often throw this question around internally as well. Like when you're trying to hire a coach, if you're an organization, whatever sport, whatever level, if you're trying to hire a coach, you kind of almost have to think, are you hiring a coach or are you hiring a culture? Because what that coach represents and his program is that's where it starts. You know what I mean? And it is a top-down approach. It's also a bottom-up approach. It's kind of which way do you look at it. But from a top-down approach, at the highest level, okay, maybe it is management, it's owners, because I mean it's their program, it is their program. But then it's like, well, how involved are they? Is it their program, or are they just handing the mantle down to now the executives, the day-to-day managers, the coaches? Because I still think at the end of it is the coach's program. Like, they're the ones who are systematically putting the players that they have on that roster in a position to succeed. They have to be the ones who look at their players' skill set, their intangibles, their personalities. Like, they have to be able to put them in a position to figure out, how do we succeed together? You know what I mean? Because if you think about how many different ways, even in basketball, how many different ways you can put 5 players together on a court, like, it's a lot more than you would ever consider. And then football, baseball, and you got a lot more players, it gets even more chaotic. You know what I mean? So the coach really needs to know, have a great background of knowing all these things, but for sure they need to know the player. Like, and so those intangibles they are immeasurable. They really are, but they do feed the greater good of the whole program. So knowing that you need certain players with IQs or talent, size, skill, whatever it is, but like knowing that they mesh well together, those are intangibles, right? Like being able to have that cohesion, chemistry, but again, trust. And that might be one thing. It'd be an interesting thing to look at 5 players who are more talented, who have zero trust and are very egocentric and selfish on the court, versus 5 players who have maybe inferior talent, so to speak, or experience, but they have a lot stronger bond and connection with each other. Who's going to win? I mean, you really don't know. But I'm willing to say that I would rather coach the team that has that cohesion, chemistry, because more than likely those guys are also a growth mindseted group of individuals who are more open, honest, and adaptable than these guys are. You know what I mean? So I think those intangibles, that's a great question, and I don't think we can truly answer it. I know I can't. I can give you my personal insights, but often that doesn't mean anything. You know, I'm not the one truly driving a program. I'm just a cog in the wheel and just trying to do my best to make sure that I bring my adaptability to the whole program.
So when it comes to then balancing culture, pressure, and performance, how do you maybe deal with that? Knowing that success takes time, you can't really skip the process. So how do you balance that pressure of we need to win and we need to put something on the court quickly that's going to produce versus understanding in that culture aspect, like we're trying to build something here that's not a quick fix, but a long-term winning formula. So how do you kind of balance that?
Yeah, I think that you have to truly eliminate the long term. Like, you know that that's what you aspire and you really want, but that is a construct. I think I was telling you yesterday what I've learned so much and I appreciate is the fact that how our minds work is we're usually everywhere but where we're currently at. So where are you standing? And it's kind of like they say, like focus on the 3 feet in front of you, right? Like that's all that you can control. Like even in some of these conversations, I've learned it's so hard for people to not have, especially if you're on a camera, but much less in any conversation, it's so hard for you to listen to somebody and what they're truly saying and unpack that rather than I'm already thinking of the next thing I'm going to say, right?
Yeah.
Like you're so far ahead or you're worrying about other things that maybe have hurt you in the past. Like, oh, I've been on a podcast before. I look awful. I really just rambled, which, you know what I mean? All these things. But it's a great question because you just have to be fully present as best as you can. And if you focus on that, like let's get a win today, meaning not just the game, but did we do everything that we could do to get better today, individually, as a group? And so, but if you start looking at these things where you want to be, again, a Steve Kerr or a Pop, where you want to have this legacy of just known for building these teams, these programs, well, you can't get there unless you've won today. And then you build on that, and then you've won tomorrow. And tomorrow's is a bigger win than today. Like you have to build on those things, but it starts with simple. But most people don't want simple. They want fast, they want sexy, that's not how this works. I mean, unfortunately, that's the era that we're in with the tools that we have, where everything that you look at with social media, it's like, I want what they have, rather than focusing on, well, what do I have? What can I internalize and what can I build upon? And so I think those are the things that we all have to honor and foster a bit more. But you saying just the word success, I go back to that quote that was really hit home in our organization and just the people around me for many years, which is like success, if you circle it, that's where opportunity meets preparation, right? And they're kind of pointing to it. So it's going to come down to maybe one of those two things, because the success of an athlete, if you look at one player, Michael Jordan, for example, still, I saw something the other day that said, hey, had he not been picked at that pick and went somewhere else, he wouldn't have been who he was. Well, that's true no matter however you look at it. Like he may have been more successful. He may have been, you know, not a bust, so to speak, but you know what I mean? You have no idea the trajectory of any person's path and the ripple effect or butterfly effect that happens with those minor changes. That's just how it is. But also it doesn't matter, because what happened is exactly what needed to happen. Why? Because that's what happened, right? You can't change it. We can talk about woulda, coulda, shoulda been, but that simple thing where success is where preparation meets opportunity. So if a player goes to a team and he gets drafted, but there is absolutely zero opportunity for him to play, well, it's hard for him to be successful, right? He can still make all the best choices he can to work hard, put the controllable efforts in there day after day, and he's getting better. But in the world's eyes, he's not successful because, one, he's not even getting playing time, you know? So then he starts to worry and fear a lot more things about, well, what's my contract moving forward? Like these things start to weigh on guys, right? But then some of it is, all right, you have an opportunity, but you're not prepared, right? Like you're a rookie thrown into it. Like these are like Orlando right now, the Ranchero guy. Like If you go to a team, you may not have those reps yet, but guess what? You have all the opportunity. You're going to get that preparation. You're going to build on that by having that opportunity. This is what most number one. This is why the draft is beautiful, because the number one pick is probably the guy who has a ton of talent, top 5 guys. But you hope that you're going to go to a team. Now, these guys probably just want to go to a good market and be in a good situation. But more than anything, I think what's important for these guys is that they get those reps, because nothing is going to beat experience. You know what I mean? And once you get that opportunity, those two things, they're going to outweigh everything when it comes to the level of success that you're going to have.
I think what's interesting, and again, I just saw this clip earlier and I was talking to you about it off air, but Cam Johnson talking about Mikal Bridges, that exact same quote where preparation meets opportunity. So I think something that's really unique about Mikal Bridges is if you ask most people, they thought it came out of nowhere. And Cam Johnson was like, no, like this didn't come out of nowhere. I watched him do this every single day. He's an every single day guy. It's just he was a role player in Phoenix. He's like, we both go to Brooklyn. Now all of a sudden he's the focal guy. So he's like, I'm not surprised by this at all, because we've trained for this every summer, every practice. We trained for these shots. We trained for these opportunities. We were just fitting a different role. So is that something that's like unique to Mikal and Cam Johnson, or how can you take those things and replicate it in other guys to use them as an example and say, take what they did, buy into whatever your role is, but still train like you're the guy, so that whenever inevitably, whether it's due to injury or trade, when that opportunity comes, you're prepared for it. Because I think what happens with us athletes is we make excuses frequently, like, oh, they got that chance, I didn't get that chance. But what frequently happens is kind of like how you were articulating, we're not always prepared because we want to sulk, or we want to, think that something is out there against us, the world's working against us, instead of just really focusing, like you said, on the present moment, doing what you need to do today to win. Is like, how can you transfer that to other guys? Like, what messaging can you use from that story?
Yeah, no, that is exactly what you hear. It is like those two guys alone. What you said earlier is how a lot of athletes, they want to sulk, they want to, it all comes down to choices, and you even have those choices. Now, there are some things completely out of our control, and we hear the very cliche thing thrown around quite often nowadays: control what you can control. That's all referring to choices, right? Now, you don't have a choice of this condition you have, or this environmental constraint that you have where the coach isn't playing you, or whatever it may be. But now you have a choice in how you respond to it. It's if you put these two words together, response, ability, you know what I mean? Like, if you can respond accordingly to whatever is there in front of you, you're still going to get a win out of that day. And that is Mikal. Mikal and Cam both have such high humility and gratitude to them that you've seen it. That is who they are. Like, what you see is what you get out of those guys, which is what makes them so genuine and authentic. And now seeing the success that they continue to have, that's no accident. And those are guys who have truly honored, like, mastering the simple, basic things that build, and that they will literally survive the test of time, of how they just keep getting better, because they have a mindset of, I'm going to get the work in today. You know what I mean? So, but those guys who do want to sulk, unfortunately, they fall into that trap of the victim mentality. That's an egocentric approach. We all have egos. We're never going to get rid of them. We've all played the blame game. It's very easy to do that, but that is the easy way out. That's a cop-out. That's an excuse. That's something, rather than taking radical accountability or responsibility to whatever is in front of you. So those two guys, I love genuinely. Like, they were and are like such anchors of this league that there's a reason why people like gravitate to them, not only on social media as fans, but like in the locker room, their presence, it's profound. Like, you really can't even measure how important those guys are. And especially the day that trade went down, I can't even explain how many people were crying and sobbing. It's one of those things where when you're around them, you feel that you're getting better every day. And when you can see it day after day, like I was able to for 5 years, you see how their routines, their approach, just their every way about themselves, like, you can't measure it. Like, they're only going to keep getting better. So again, those are two guys that constantly tap the preparation. And of course they had opportunities when they were here with our team. That's, that's coming out of college. Somebody like Mikal Bridges is a rookie. We weren't very good that year. We were technically the youngest team in the NBA. But he was prepared very well. So was Cam, kind of older guys coming out of the draft, but coming from programs that were very well respected and coached that taught them those things from humility, gratitude, as well as their family lifestyle. Like they just have an incredible support group around them that has basically beaten in those intangibles that allows them to hang their hat on those things that no matter what, win or loss, good season, bad season, ups or downs, they know the direction, which is just to keep focusing on the things that they can control. But those two guys, they're really hard to measure any other players, I feel like, in the league compared to those guys. And you see it. Like a guy like Mikal Bridges who hasn't missed a single game, his level of intent and just the things that he does, it's insane. Now, on the flip side, you got a guy like Cam who has had a history of some injuries. Same thing. You can't even come close to measuring the intent and the approach he has to overcoming those things, to just accepting it, being able to internalize it and say, well, this is what I got to do. Like, I've just averted from the plan a little bit, but this is how I get better each and every day based on what's in front of me. And then you see how quickly those guys just get right back to just doing what they do well.
So a couple words you said there: responsibility, acceptance, obviously the cliche, control what you can control. I've become really obsessed with human behavior, because I could tell you to your face a million times, you have to accept it, control what you can control. It's not always your fault what happens to you, but it's your responsibility to react off of that and to choose the right things. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the human behavior aspect, what is your theory that actually gets people to change? I know our human nature is to avoid pain and seek pleasure, but the understanding that sometimes working through pain or working through hard is actually your answer, and that's where you're going to get the satisfaction. But again, I could tell you that till I'm blue in the face, but it still might not change your action. So it's what is your theory or your belief around getting guys to actually change their behaviors when the answers are right in front of them?
Yeah, we touched a little bit about this yesterday. I mean, you cannot. This is, I think, something I learned in one of the first books I read when I was a teenager, which was Dale Carnegie's book, right? How to make friends and win people type, and you cannot get anybody to do anything unless that person wants to do it.
Yes.
So this again goes back to meeting the person where they're at. If I'm working with a 15, 16, or even a 20-year-old person whose just whole life is ahead of them and they have no care in the world, they're confident, ignorance is bliss, which is how I was, you know what I mean? It's not right, it's not wrong, but just knowing where that person's at, you have to just try to figure out, well, okay, how can I make or assist in having a positive influence on this person so that I can make sure they have the right tools, the right mindset, whatever it be, to head down the positive path. If you think of everything we're talking about comes down to you're going down the road and then it forks. You got a fork in the road. Again, we're talking about choices. You have a choice. Which direction do you go? But those choices all need to be predicated and leaned on one thing, which is your purpose. So this is where, for me, I know for you as well, it comes down to unveiling the identity of that person. So meeting them where they're at. Again, you keep saying that all over. But it's purpose. What is the purpose? What's that person's identity? What really do they care about? What is their reason why? So even just start with some simple stuff with an athlete. Why do you play basketball? It's a simple thing. I guarantee you most of these guys can't genuinely even answer that. Most of them, it all starts with just a youthful love for just being active, and playing the sport. It's a lot of fun. This is why a lot of kids quit sports too, because we have everyday parents and volunteers coaching rec sports that aren't really equipped to deal with the human condition or to coach people. They're just doing it because it's their calling. Nobody was signing up to coach. I'm going to coach, but maybe they're not the best person. So then their kids having, an experience, but then the 10 other kids are maybe having a poor experience because this guy doesn't know how to coach. I'm not blaming the coach. I'm just saying some of these reasons that kids quit is because the number one reason is they're not having fun. So then as soon as eventually those guys that keep playing and they make it to the AAU level, the junior high, the high school team, like all these things, these traveling teams, it's amazing to see that at some point in there, like they kind of lost having fun. So then you just have to start unpacking and exploring more. Well, what's the purpose? Why do you play? It's amazing that, and hard to believe that even some of the rookies that come out of college or high school and they're trying to go to the league, if you were to ask them that question, some of them aren't telling you a truthful answer, and you can kind of read between the lines there. Some of them are genuine and actually tell you that they don't love playing. This is just their maybe God-given ability that they're maximizing. That's okay too, but it's an interesting thing to look at from each person and figure out where they're at and their purpose. And so that purpose is going to drive. Again, if you were to have that athlete who really said, I don't love playing anymore, I've kind of lost my love for it, but I'm good at it, this is what I'm going to do, I have this opportunity, cool. Let's take that, harness it, unpack it a little bit more so that we can get the best out of that for you, right? Not the team, not anybody else. Like, this is for you, the end user. So that's what I'm really interested in exploring, because most people don't have the ability to go that deep and ask some of these questions or unveil it and point them in the right direction when a fork in the road comes. Because if you can constantly lean towards that one direction, that one road, that is going to build you up, that is going to benefit you, help you grow. That's what we're trying to do, right? Like, you're not always going to be a straight line. Like, this journey is chaotic. It's an everyday chaotic puzzle. But that's how I've been starting to look at these things and how I'm trying to help athletes, because it is far more than just the physical things that we beat home every day. You know what I mean? So those things are important to me right now, but I think it all falls down to purpose, and you have to try to figure out what their purpose is. And it doesn't matter at the end of the day, because again, a pop at 7 years old might say, this is what they need to do, this needs to be their purpose, because that's what he believed, or that's what he was taught when he was that age. Well, couple decades later, it's an entirely different environment of what this kid's going through, right? And so you just got to figure some of those things out and then try to find the things that can point them in a positive direction.
So kind of going off of this, and we talked about it again at dinner yesterday, one of my questions to you was like, sometimes I don't know if my own self-awareness is detrimental or beneficial. The fact that I am so consciously aware of every thought and every action and every choice I have. It actually kept me up last night thinking about it. But the solution I came to overnight was, it's only going to work in my benefit if I allow it, and it's only going to be detrimental if I allow it to be. So I think for a lot of these guys, and you talked about it earlier, is they have to make the individual choice. No one's coming to save them. Mm-hmm. It's them and only them who can drive their own success or unsuccess. Do you think when we talk about being ignorance is bliss, are we setting young athletes up to fail by allowing them to not understand the future struggles or the future pain that may be coming? And is it advantageous to bring it up to a blissful person who lives in ignorance, young kids, be like, I understand that this is really fun and all, but if you want to continue to progress, you have to get used to some discomfort here and start to bring some of that awareness to pain that they're eventually going to feel that they can't understand yet? Or do you think that that's probably not advantageous for young athletes?
Yeah, I think they're all going to learn these things one way or another. Even, we watch movies when we're younger about, like, sad stories lead to positive endings, all these various things. Like, they're exposed to all these emotions. The good coaches, I think, even some of the high school coaches that I think of that I had the pleasure of working with, like, they instilled a lot of those things, that when you experience hardship or success or whatever it may be, like, how do you embrace that, take it head on, the radical accountability or responsibility piece we talked about, and just take it head on, right, rather than avoid it. And I think that's what we were going back to earlier, when today's piece of, it's so easy, it's a great tool in a lot of ways, the social media and the internet, but then it's also a detriment at the same time, because a lot of us really don't want to be vulnerable enough to post the bad things in our lives or the things that we have tough times going through. We want to post all the celebrations, all the praise, all the things that I have, like, look at me. And so that is the hard part that I have with it is that it's only showing one side of the coin where, more often than not, you're going to experience the other side. And how do you get through that? How do you overcome that? So I do think, to your point, we need to find a better way to help people navigate these things, but they have to navigate it themselves, right? They have to eventually add to their own toolbox that helps them, be able to pull from in certain situations and say, oh, okay, I feel like I've experienced this emotion before. Like, well, okay, again, down to choices. I've experienced this situation before. I've been cut from a team. All right, I have two decisions. Like, what way am I going to go? Like, am I just going to give up and quit? Like, I'm just going to wait around. I'm going to sulk. I'm going to binge watch shows, all these things. Or I'm going to go this route and I'm going to focus on the things that I can control. I'm still going to get my work in. I'm going to do all these intangibles that I can constantly lean on, because it's only going to serve me. It's going to help me develop, grow. And at the same time, you're kind of putting that positiveness out into your atmosphere, into your world. And eventually, when that is your mindset, the gratitude, like humility, like just all these things, then you start to notice the things that are right in front of you that you can love and honor. Like, it's kind of like when you think of a car. You trying to buy a car, right? You want to go buy a Tesla, and you're like, man, that'd be pretty cool. And you go look at a Tesla, and then that next day you're just driving around in your own car, and you realize you've seen Teslas everywhere. They're everywhere, right? Like, that's kind of how the mind works. It's wired that way. Like, once all of a sudden you've kind of put that into the atmosphere, you start to see these things a lot more clearly. Now, when you can do that with gratitude, with humility, with all these things that are going to benefit you, then you're going to see those opportunities more and more just come at you, and you can take them head on. You're going to love that rather than avoidance, So again, everything I'm trying to talk about is you have those two decisions, and it may be a situation you never wanted. You don't want to have a situation of, being cut from a team or a death in the family, whatever it may be, but that's happened, right? Now it's like, again, where are you at, like current present moment, 3 feet in front of you, like, how are you going to handle that? You know what I mean? And you've seen it. We all see it. People who can handle a lot of these hard things in such a graceful way, and you just ask yourself, man, how did he do that? What was he like? I just don't understand how they were able to handle that, in such a good way. And I mean, these are no different than the ball handling thing. When you've had a ball in your hand since you were 5, or you've been working on some of these intangible mindsets, then it just grows. It fosters. You've planted that seed. And so, again, I can go on all these things for on and on because they're endless and they serve you so well. But I do believe that, the social media, all these things, we are masking what these young athletes or just human beings are going to experience, which is hardship. It is joy. It's all these things. But if you can lean on the things that more or less fill your cup rather than empty it, you know what I mean? That's what's going to happen. And there's one thing I was going to say too. When you ask about the Mikel piece, it's kind of the same quote that I read a few weeks ago. It was like Lionel Messi's quote that literally said, it was like, it took 17 years, 259 days for me to become an overnight success.
Yes.
It's literally the same thing. I'm like, so if you're adding all these things, whether it's a mindset, whether it's a physical attribute, strength and conditioning, whatever it is, you just keep adding it, keep stacking those things, because eventually now you have that tool in your toolbox. You know what I mean? It's the hammer, where if all you had is a hammer, how are you going to build a house? But it's like, I always think of, people think the hammer of just beating a nail in, but at the same time, if you think on the other side, all right, I flipped this hammer, I got this nail stuck in there, I can pry it out. You know what I mean? Like, you find various ways to use all these tools.
So when we're talking about the tools, how do you avoid the buzzwords or the connotation around buzzwords? Like, for me, I'm very linguistic, so I try and define things in a different way. It's like, to give you an example, instead of like self-talk, I use like internal dialogue, because I feel like that hits different.
Yeah.
But I feel like when we talk about, meditation, mindfulness, visualization, things that I'm unbelievably in love with and use in my own practice, when you bring them up to people, you get like a certain look from some people. Right? They don't understand. They're like, oh, that's fluff, that's buzzwords, but it's because they don't understand the root of it. So when you're working with athletes on this and you're trying, again, to get that buy-in, how do you broach those subjects with them to be like, hey, like, this actually works. Like, you want to be an overnight success in 10 years? Well, you got to start now to start doing these things. Because a simple exercise like gratitude, journaling, done over and over again makes a world of a difference.
Yeah.
And you can't really know that until you experience it.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate those initial conversations?
Yeah, I think it starts by just, again, like we keep saying, meet them where they're at. But really, it's like you have to start by figuring out what do they understand about it. Like, what is how do they internalize this? So if you were to throw that at somebody and say, hey, what do you think about self-talk? And they literally are like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It starts there. You know what I mean? Then you have to be an educator. That's all we really are as well, not just in these roles, but let's say you and your brothers or sisters, whoever, you're having conversations and you throw that at them and they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Then it just becomes, well, how can you educate them?
Yeah.
You know, these again are the soft skills, the art behind these relationships that you're slowly building. And maybe it's the first time you're meeting with an athlete, so you don't have that relationship, but you're just trying to figure out what they understand, what they know. And then from there, you start to go a little bit further. What do they believe? What's their self-belief of it? What's their buy-in? Because there are a lot of things now that you're seeing. The meditation, you know what I mean? Michigan's quarterback, like all these things. It's amazing. But these are also things that have been here for thousands of years, right? Like these aren't just, they didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
And they are all experienced so differently from each individual. So it really just starts with the conversations of what do they know about it? And you may throw that at them and say, what do you think about self-talk? And then they're like, what do you mean? I've never heard of that. And then when you start to educate them or talk about it, they're like, oh, you mean like internal dialogue, like what you said. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like what they believe and how it's going to be an anchor point and be something that they can remember. That's kind of where you go with it. So again, 18 different players on a roster, it could go 18 different ways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then you might be able to eventually keep learning about them, things that they're going through, things that they're really good at, but also things that might be blind spots for them. And then you start to just bring up more of these things about, hey, like, what do you think about this? And you got to find the positive, clever ways to educate them to show how powerful it could be if they consider this. You know what I mean? Meditation, you know, self-talk, we all have that. Like you literally are born. I was saying this the other day. It's kind of like maybe a morbid thing to think, like you're born alone, you're going to die alone.
Yeah.
No matter what. You know what I mean? Now, we have all kinds of little pick-me-ups along this journey, which are obviously your family, right? Your best friends, your teammates, your spouse, your children. Like they are jumping on that bus in your journey and you're on theirs, right? But it is your journey. So when you're going along that road, like you just have to realize like that self-talk, that internal dialogue, your actions, your choices in that fork in the road, like they're yours. Like people can help have a influence or a persuasion, but it is your choice. And then it comes back to that accountability piece that you were talking about, that responsibility. It's on you. You know what I mean? No matter what. Now, there are plenty of circumstances and things that we'll experience in life that you don't want to experience, but here it is, right? A death in the family. Again, you cut from the team. You have a bad game. All right, how am I going to respond? So, but these are all great conversations because I think that they need to be had more and more, you know, because we need to start asking each of us like deeper questions that we probably don't want to or like to think of, most of us. I think I'm just in a different phase and chapter in my life where you realize these things, if you can unpack them and realize them at such a younger age, they're going to serve you, you know what I mean? And I think that's sometimes when you even see some of these young athletes who clearly have a demeanor and a high IQ to them on the court, this presence of like, not rattled, like they're just hyper focused. Like you can tell that they have that just a step further than the average athletes that they're competing against. But that's also an 18-year veteran versus an 18-year-old rookie. Like there's going to be a wide gap there. You know what I mean? So they're important things. They're just as important as the physical and the technical skill sets that they have. But I think that they are conversations that everybody needs to be having. And if they're troubled with it, then they need to kind of look at their inner circle, whether that be their family, their spouse, their friends, a psychologist. It doesn't matter. Like people that they can trust to have some of these tough, deep-rooted conversations, because it's going to impact a lot more of that identity for closure that I think you and I have kind of shared as an interest in.
I love having these conversations, and I love going as deep as possible. There's a number of different things that you talked about that I want to be able to unpack. one thing real quick, you talked about being born alone, dying alone. I think one of the best perspectives to have is, and again, it may be morbid, but it's like you're going to die. Every opinion you ever worried about won't matter. Your opinion of yourself essentially will be gone. So everything that you're worried about day to day isn't going to matter at one point. So like for me, that's actually like a super powerful perspective to have. And it doesn't resonate with everyone, but like it resonates like heck with me, because like I know like when I'm stressing like day to day, like, oh, what about this or this person's thoughts, this person's opinion of me. Well, I'm like, as I begin to catastrophize, I'm like, okay, well, let's catastrophize this all the way down to 0, which is I die. At what point does that matter then? Right? I'm dead. So it's like, I don't like to have people catastrophize, but sometimes I feel like playing out it actually helps. Mm-hmm. And so like, I don't know if you do that in your own practice, like with yourself or with others, but like for me, I found that that's something super helpful. So like, do you do that with yourself, or like, is it just kind of, is what it is?
No, I definitely have phases where like you'll just find yourself deep in thought, which most of us alone is tough. I did this last night where you just lay there and you try to just not fidget, not look at your phone, not pet your dog, where you're just like in pure silence and just like, all right, like what's my mind telling me right now? Like what's my life source right now telling me, you know what I mean? Like just different things, but it's hard at some points in your life to not catastrophize things, or to think these random thoughts, you know what I mean? If I'm not here, what have I left or imparted on my daughter, my siblings, my family? So those are deeply rooted questions too that I think most people need to unpack, because it is a smack in the face when somebody you deeply care for in that inner circle of yours, let's just say a best friend of yours, dies.
Yeah.
So, tomorrow. And it's always the same thing that people say, man, like if they're in your thoughts, call them, text them, hug them. Like it's kind of the morbid thing too, where it's like, just treat people in a way where like, even if they're not your best friend, man, like having this weird, for some people it's helpful to have this like thought where like when you're leaving somebody, kind of think there's a small piece of you that you may not ever see them again. You know what I mean? Like, so that is a very vulnerable way of living. I think it can be very helpful. It can be impactful. For some people, though, they're all or nothing. And then if they do that and they live in this like catastrophizing state, but they can't flip it and be like, all right, now, you know what I mean? Like you go down that path a little bit, then you come back and it's like, what could I take of that was positive, versus just, I went down this path and now I'm stuck in it. You know what I mean? And the world's crumbling around me and world's on fire. I'm stressed out. At that point, you're literally, I believe, you're shaving years off of your life. You know what I mean? But so it's with everything. It's taking everything in, like whatever you're experiencing, and having it just embracing it non-judgmentally. Like that is, if people will start to learn what mindfulness is and go and just learn a little bit more from like a George Mumford or some of these people like John Kabat-Zinn, these guys who are deeply rooted for decades of using these skills, and realize what it is. Like you can call it as, foo-foo and like all these cliche things, and that's not for me. That's okay, but you are doing this one way or another. You are talking to yourself. Your mind is constantly working, even at your sleep and your dream state, all these various things. You are having an internal dialogue.
Yes.
Now, the thing is that you can learn is, are you talking to yourself and projecting, or are you just listening to yourself? Because they're both good, but like, if I'm listening to myself, man, I'm stressed out. Man, I'm gonna miss this shot. Man, I'm not prepared for this test. I'm gonna fail. All these various things. Or can you flip it and say like, all right, I just took that in. Like, why did that thought resonate? Now I'm gonna flip it and say, no, I am prepared. I'm going to do this. No, I'm ready for this game. You know what I mean? And just flipping things around. Like when playoffs come, I've seen guys who are the best athletes in the world still get the jitters, still have pregame anxieties, throw up, all these things that you and I experience. And this is one of the reasons why this has been so cool for me to go down this path, is because that limited me significantly when I was an athlete. Like would absolutely dominate the field when it was practice, or it was just like I didn't feel like there was this hanging cloud.
I want to touch on this in my own experience when you're done too.
Yeah,
so.
let's do it, because then you go to play and you're literally just like, what is it? And it is a self-talk inner dialogue thing. You are prepared, you've done the work, hay's in the barn, so to speak, you know what I mean? Like there's nothing more you can do except in your pre-game priming preparation, and even from a mindset standpoint, you can tell yourself, no, I'm not anxious.
Yeah.
I'm not nervous. I'm excited. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it's like you flip it. And
Yes.
it comes down to what you were saying, how you speak, your communication, all these things, they do matter. You know what I mean? Because some of it is withholding, some of it is self-limiting. So they are very important things that I think are just as important as somebody's ball handling drills and their ability. Like they go hand in hand.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I'm going to try and articulate this flowingly. As a player, I dealt with that. I was like, particularly early on in my career in athletics, I was dominant on the practice field. And I had a really good production from like a in-game standpoint. But those thoughts overwhelmed me to the point where I would be so jittery before games and I couldn't get it under wraps. What I later learned is how to fall back on my competence, right? Because I believe your confidence comes from competence and then cognitive recognition of your competence. So I had the competence piece, like I was talented, studied film, practiced hard, spent time in the trainer's room, but I never gave myself the cognitive recognition. So we're talking about internal dialogue. I didn't have that piece. So for me, my self-doubt overwhelmed me. Now I was fortunate enough that my competence was still able to allow me to perform at a good level, but not the level that I knew I was capable of. And so, like, I think that is just a massive piece. And that's why I say, like, your internal dialogue, your self-communication, how do you work through these things? Right? And it's that piece of recognizing I've put in all this work. And that's what I did really poorly as an athlete, was go through that and understand, like, okay, yes, you literally studied film significantly more than your teammates, right? And here's like the iPad stats, right? Like here's your proof of that. You know what this person does when they do that, right? You've taken the reps here or there. So I think that's a huge piece that we frequently miss. And I try and work on that. Well, first you got to build the competence, then you have to build your recognition of your competence, and then you can be confident. So it's just such like an interesting conversation, because we miss that piece. And then when you try and like bring it up, it becomes like foo-foo, like you said. Mm-hmm. But world conquerors, before civilizations were built, would journal. They'd have people talking in their ear, victory is fleeting. But then all of a sudden now, flash forward after civilizations have been built, it's like, now this is foo-foo. It's like, well, it wasn't foo-foo for the world conqueror who established civilizations.
Right. When people realize and read that was one of the things that helped them become who they are.
Yes.
If everybody read that Kobe Bryant was an avid journaler,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, it changes everything. But yes, I completely understand.
Why do you think it is that athletes frequently wait until after they're done playing to talk about some of the mindset stuff? Do you think it's so they have a competitive advantage while they're playing? This is pure speculation.
Yeah, I don't know. Everybody's going to answer that differently, like I've said, and I'm comfortable answering. I don't know, you know what I mean, and a lot of things. I think that gives me an edge to be able to explore it, and also just to keep it open-minded of saying it could be this, it could be that.
The reason I ask, like, I think about it too, because Robert Griffin III was talking about a time he asked Tom Brady to like mentor him. And Tom Brady just politely declined. He was like, hey, like, you can do big things in this game. I appreciate you, but, like, no. Like,
yeah.
Basically, I'm going to keep it for myself.
That's fair. I mean, we're all looking for the competitive edge when we're in it.
Yeah.
Right? And that's fair.
Yeah.
Like, now, Kobe Bryant was notorious kind of towards the tail end of his career to kind of start mentoring guys or doing little things. But he wouldn't take anybody under his wing and say, hey, man, like, you're on the other team. I'm going to give you my full-fledged diary of like how-tos, you know what I mean? Like he started to open up a lot more about that after.
Yeah.
And then you realize after he was done playing, you're like, and for me being somebody who grew up in Salt Lake City, like just an avid, like a non-Laker guy.
Yeah.
Just put it that way as politely as I can.
Yeah.
So when you see a guy like that and you're just like, man, like rooting against him, but you can see how talented and how special he is. But then after he's done playing, right? He's not there anymore. It's not somebody that you're like really rooting against. you see what he came out with and his mindset, and you're like him and a Tom Brady, all those guys that just they're light years ahead of the others, not just in their skill set. I think their skill set was a derivative of the mindset that they instilled and fostered in their preparations, you know what I mean? And it's pretty special to see what those guys kind of spit out after the fact, you know what I mean? But there are some guys that certainly are light years ahead of others, but even if you look in the league of the NBA, the guys who are special, they're special because they had the opportunities, and then their preparations were good enough to keep giving them those opportunities, and then they just kept building on one another. Next thing you know, you've got this staircase, right, that's spiraling, and it's never ending. It is never ending. If you were to ask Tom Brady if he felt like he could have done more, if he had more in the tank, like if he could go back and do it again, the answer is always, as an athlete, going to be yes.
Yes.
Because you're not going to ever limit yourself and say no.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? To see how special him or Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, all these guys, Lionel Messi, you look at these guys, I guarantee you the answer will always say yes. Yeah. But it didn't happen, right? Like, they were still amazing, but Tom Brady said, yeah, I could have won 10 Super Bowls, whatever it is. Like, that's the confidence, the self-belief. Those are competitive edges too, like instantly.
Yes.
It's yes. And I'm buying in and I'm going to do it. But it's like, yeah, like at the same time, I do think when you are in it, like you're not going out and sharing all these secrets. But some of them also, on the flip side, they may not have a clue. Yeah. They're just doing it and they just don't know how they're doing it. They're just, oh, I'm not trying to deviate from that too. I don't want to start overanalyzing because maybe they are somebody who overthinks it and catastrophizes things. And then maybe now that was the downfall of what could have been. So you just have to figure these guys out and what works and what limits them. And then you go from there.
That I'm so fascinated at unpacking outliers. I think a good testament to if you actually work hard is, for example, if I ask you, like, could you have done more? And you say, no, I did everything I could. To me, most of the people that have that answer really aren't working as hard as they think they are. Versus like you just said, if you ask the Tom Brady or some of these elites, like, did you do everything you could? Most of them are going to say, no, I could have done more, despite their immense success. And I feel like hard workers or people who are like truly driven will frequently doubt their level of like, am I working hard enough? Am I doing enough? And yet they're doing more than everybody else. Mm-hmm. And you could argue, is that a sickness, right? Is that like a sickness, or is it a testament to their true like work ethic?
Yeah, it's just their approach. That's just how they do things. I don't know if you can say it's their competitiveness versus like, you know, a condition, so to speak, of just how they're hardwired. You know what I mean? You don't know. Like, again, those are things that take time to figure out as well. I would love to be able to just say, knowing what I know now too, like, can I go back in time and work with a Kobe Bryant from the moment he was in junior high to, you know what I mean? And just like, even just from not even saying a word to him, just observe and just see those things over time and how they unpack, you know, it's.
Because think about it, a lot of the ultimate achievers in this world weren't meant to be there. So it's not just pure talent. They just found a way to unlock their talent. Mm-hmm. So for me, like, you look at Kobe, Steph Curry, Tom Brady, even guys like Brock Purdy, you know, Peyton Manning. Like, I know Peyton Manning was the first overall pick. Peyton Manning couldn't throw the ball 50 yards. So it's like, what did they do and how did they unlock it? Because it's clearly not just physical. And that's why I've just become so unbelievably obsessed with this, like the conqueror's mindset, and really just trying to levy out what these guys did, how they approach their mind, how they approach their work, combine it, and then channel it to the younger generation. Mm-hmm. Create a world where everyone can kind of lean into that pain, the power of yet, and then become better and maximize themselves. I know you can't save everyone, but to never, or to be able to say, no athlete could ever say I didn't have the resources.
Yeah, you know, I mean, even while they're younger, like we brought up earlier, just having some of these conversations at a younger age and seeing where their minds go with it. Maybe they've never even thought of it, and you just start throwing organic and even curious questioning to them. Like, you could ask a young athlete, like, if you could pick one athlete, period, who you look up to or who you would want to be, and just see what their answer is. They may answer somebody just because they're popular or whatever, but then, okay, if you ask him and he says Steph Curry, and you're like, all right, why? Like, now give me one reason why did you pick Steph Curry? They may say something from, like, his ability to shoot, or some people have said, like, just the way he his presence, you know what I mean? The way he's very calm and like just confident, whatever it is, you start to like navigate those things and just start to actually identify what is it that that person resonates with or, you know, kind of connects with. And then again, you just build from there. You start to unpack these things. Then sometimes you just realize that athlete now, Steph Curry's on his radar. And then you start just taking everything that's been from Steph Curry, the like certain quotes he has, thought processes, the way you just start to just throw that at him. And you may start to unpack more and more. But either way, you're finding tools to drive through that player of how do you build. You know what I mean? So there's a lot there that's just an endless road to mastery. You know what I mean? And again, some people want to use that as a buzzword
Mastery,
of finding mastery, but at the same time, it's endless. That's why I say, like, if you ask Tom Brady and them, they're gonna say, yes, I had more, because they also acknowledge that this is a never-ending evolution to their journey.
Yes. So to maybe like bring all this like kind of back home, right? And we're talking about as we learn information in innovation, how do you balance when you're incorporating plans, right? When you're trying to, you know, put together the best plan for an athlete to succeed, how do you balance innovation versus basics and tradition? What basics and traditions are never changing versus what innovations can you start to include from like a sports performance perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with, you know, whatever sport you're in, you probably know that sport pretty well. You know what I mean? What are the demands or the rigors of that game? You know what I mean? Like, what does it require from a physical standpoint, from an energy solution standpoint, all these various things. But then again, it starts with that athlete. Like, what do you know about them? Like, what do they say on film? Whether they're just coming out of college, like what they've shown. Now, what are you seeing about them, how they've evolved now that they're in the professional setting and practicing with guys who've been in this league 15 years? You start to just figure out what they've currently got. You know what I mean? What is in the tank, and now how can we add to it? So whether that's a physical thing, whether that's, you know, there's a few pillars that you just can't deny. Like, if you really want to be good at these things, of course, the skill set, right? So whatever that technical, tactical like aspect is of being on the court, on the field, on the pitch, you know what I mean? Like, you have to work at that. And they've probably been doing that since they were young, right? Then you have to just go to the physiological things that you can't deny. Like, are you sleeping really well? Do you have, you know, sleep-induced insomnia, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, there are a number of things that athletes are leaving on the table. Like, there are blind spots. Sleep, especially in pro sports, like, it is very hard to get sound sleep. It is very hard to have routines. Like, it's you just reading a book from Matthew Walker or some of these guys that say this is what you have to do. I firmly believe that, but it's impossible.
Yeah.
Okay, you write a book and you say these things, and then when you are asked questions on podcasts, those guys are the experts, and they know, like, just from afar, like, yeah, it's really hard, but they have to do this. But it's like, all right, well, then you have staff who come and live it, and they join the staff, and they realize what it's like to travel. I'm not the one even performing.
Yeah.
But how it impacts you after 2 months into a season, 4 months into a season, 6 months, and now we're supposed to turn up a notch and go into championship mindset and raise the bar. But you're depleted because for 6 months now you've been living off of microdose naps.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, game ends, you go home, it's 12:30, you got to wake up, you've got meetings, you've got preparations, treatments, lifting, practice, and then you get on a flight. Then you get on a flight, you get in there, like, so you're all over the place. So anyway, sleep is one thing. You've got the skill set, you've got sleep, you've got your fueling, right? So, like, you just can't deny what you're putting into your body. And again, we're all going back to those two decisions. Like, which decisions are you making that lead you down a better path? So the nutrition piece, and most of these teams are bringing so many good resources, clean education from dietitians. Are they listening to it? And I don't know, but I'm willing to tell you that I can think of the majority of athletes who are missing some of these buckets, right? They're not working hard enough within their control on their skill set. They're missing gains when it comes to sleep. They're definitely not eating enough, but definitely what they should be eating, fueling with hydration, all these different things that they've been tried and true. They're literally the test of time, but they're not doing these things, right? They want to eat junk food. Again, think of yourself when you were an 18-year-old kid. Like, That doesn't apply to me.
Yep.
Like, look at my physique, look at what I can do. I don't have to do that. Okay, you know what I mean? But it all comes down to just educating these athletes on how important these things are. But I also do believe that recovery, that word alone, is also a significant buzzword in the last decade of health and performance. Like, everybody, and this was something that was brought on by these big corporations who want to drive it. Like, this is what happens in the marketing media. Like, so now all of a sudden everybody's like, yeah, I do want to be recovered. I do want to be at my best. So, like, every day they're trying to focus more on recovery than they're actually focusing on the stimulus, the adaptations they're chasing through training. And I'm willing to say right now, I'm going to say 95%, just random number. 95% of us who are out there thinking, oh, I got to recover. I need this Normatec boot. I need this massage. I need this cryo, all these various things. I promise you, they haven't done enough or taxed themselves enough to actually need that recovery stimulus. I'm not saying it's wrong to get it, but what we're chasing, again, two decisions, you know what I mean? So it's interesting how you look at these things, and you just have to figure out if the guy needs this versus that. Because you can never go wrong with overworking, meaning you're over-prepared, you're doing more, because that's going to benefit you. Now, if you're going to go the route of saying, I want to feel good so that the next game I might play, I'm not in the rotation, but I might play, so I'm going to skip out on this training stimulus so that I can recover and feel good enough in case I play tomorrow, and then maybe you don't play, now you've missed out on two things, you know what I mean? So you just got to figure out how to put these plans together for that individual that's going to help them thrive in whatever is going to be like today.
I've lost track of time. How I love having these conversations. I could talk about this all day, so I will wrap up here. When it comes to particularly, in the NBA, balancing that load management, again, that buzzword, we hear it in other sports too, but football, unfortunately, you don't get load management. Every single individual game, win or lose, could define your season. But basketball, you play 82 games. Hockey, you play 82 games. Baseball, you play 162 games. How do you actually balance the training of, hey, we got to prepare you for this many games, this amount of minutes, this type of intensity, versus we need to pull back on that recovery piece, like you were saying? Because I think of guys like Kobe, Michael Jordan, right, who never missed games.
And didn't have half the resources we do today.
Right. So it's like now we have guys missing tons of games, underperforming, and we're focusing on load management.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, how do you balance that? Because I err on the side of we need to put in the proper training. And obviously I'm not a physical trainer, personal trainer, but that's what worked for me was let's again, grind. I hate that word, but let's work. Let's get our work in. Let's over prepare.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question because it's a balancing act, right? Like at the end of the day, the goal is to what? It's to play the game. To play the game at the highest level. We are high competitors, whether you are the athlete or the supporting cast. We are all competitors driven by ego and the need, the want to succeed. So there is absolutely nothing that we can do off the court that is going to even come close to preparing them training on the court, on the pitch. So that's where in the college setting and the NBA, all these various things, it's where it's so hard. In the NFL, it's like you see the schedule. And of course, in hockey, baseball, basketball, like these are a little tougher than like a football, soccer, where like you're 7 days out. Like you're playing one game. You've got these, you can actually reverse engineer things a little differently. But when you go, it is harder because you can't just say, I'm not going to strength train for 6 months. Like there are little gains. Again, I love the phrase of the aggregate of marginal gains, right? Yeah. Like this is where, a few years ago, we've had an incredible strength coach in Corey Schlesinger, who's now at Texas, who was just beautifully articulates what micro dosing is, which is like you're literally just tapping, right? Yeah. Which we joked the other day, both coming from college football. Like when I was done with my final PR, testing day, I was like, that's it. I'm done. Yeah. Like my nervous system, my desires to strength train, I'm never doing it again. You'll never see me under a bar, trap bar. And now, years later, you realize all right, no, I need that. I want that. I love it. But you have to continuously tap that. So for our guys, you really just have to one, they have to train on the court. Nothing is going to supersede that. So the guys who need to keep their fitness level, their conditioning up, the best way to do that is to play. So even though they're not playing an NBA game, you still have to find a way, if they didn't play, to keep their levels up by playing. So they've got to play small-sided games. They've got to scrimmage. They've got to do these things, and you have to get really creative of when and where and how to do that, so that they're also hopefully on the same continuum as their other teammates who are playing high minutes in the rotation. So it all starts there. And now if you can't get that for some reason, then you have fail safes like plan B, C, all these things that now I can tap that. It's not the same, because just like our minds when it comes to stress, they don't know your stress. Your fight or flight doesn't know if you really are being chased by a tiger, or if you just are about to be in a head-on collision. Like, you don't know. Stress is going to just react. It's the same thing on the physical sense. Like, we have to try to find ways, if they're not playing, to then play. But if they can't play in small-sided games, now we have to find some of these other ways to tap into that, even somewhat, so that they're not falling that far off. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where my mind goes with it. I know those are loaded questions that are kind of vague, but it kind of all varies.
It actually brings me to one more question. This has been one of the fastest hours of my life, which I appreciate because I love the conversation. But in a game of athletics, nothing's predictable. But we frequently try and train predictability. Mm-hmm. How do you incorporate some of that adaptability, unpredictable training in your practices, whether that's mental training or whether that's physical training?
No, I love that question, because, like, predictability is powerful, right? Whether it's in economics, whether you name it, but it's not quite there. Like, you can try. That's where all the load management, now the technology, the data, we're trying to make smarter decisions. We're trying to, and that's what is far different than when Michael Jordan was playing, and we got athletes of that generation who are coaches today and owners today. They are making phrases that these guys are weak, they're soft. That's not the case at all. They're extremely agile, athletic. They've been coached, primed, conditioned at a younger age. So we'll never be able to answer those arguments, but we do have more information, even surgically. We have more information for imaging. We have more information from load tracking data, all these various things, patterning, right? We have more information to make more well-inclined decisions. But again, you have decisions, right? Here's a fork in the road. Do I get surgery? Do I not? So it's all great questions, great conversations that I usually tend to revolve my entire world around. But it's kind of hard to say. Honestly, it's which is not probably what people want. People want a direct answer, which is, again, they want predictability. But it's not there. So even when you're coaching, I think that when you're putting guys through workouts and stuff, I love getting creative when it comes to, like, the predictability of, for say, a guy is just working on his corner threes, right? And that is his focus for today. I'm going to make 100. Cool. If I'm a coach, I'm going to throw him 100 different passes. He's got to catch this thing at his ankles, off the dribble, all these different things, because you need to keep them guessing, right? Like, they're never going to have the perfect pass. Now, you hope in the game you got a point guard who's so precise, they're going to hit it right on the numbers with the laces exactly how you want. Good luck, dude. That's not going to happen. So you have to kind of prime and prepare those things in your training as well.
In last point, watching that game yesterday, seeing some of the best in the world compete, like even some of the role players, you know when they release the ball, which ones are going in and which ones aren't. And it's just like a pure feel, gut instinct, visual thing. But I think about all the training that goes into those things when I watch. But can't thank you enough, Brady, for coming on. I could talk to you. I say this frequently to my guests, but I could continue to talk to you for hours. But, you know, if people want to find you, they want to reach out to you, if you have anything to promote, you know, please do real quick.
No, not really. I mean, when you're kind of in the team setting, my job is to serve our team and our players at the highest function. So I really don't have anything that's out there to promote. I'm not really big on social media. I'm still very private with all that, intentionally. Again, like, I try to be very intentional with how I do things, so it's not accidental. But I do probably use Instagram the most. You know, I think my handle it's BHowe6, BHOWE 6. So I'm definitely a very open book when it comes to just trying to connect and build a community of like-minded individuals. So I'm definitely happy to answer questions and all that, and just kind of go from there.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. Honestly, it means the world to me. It's been an awesome couple of days, fantastic conversation. Guys, make sure to tune in next week. Like, rate, subscribe, throw Brady a follow. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Of course, it was fun.